the 13th of February, and we are going to get an introduction to a bill so we can kind of think it over and decide if we're going to take it up further from Representative Donahue, our favorite member from Northfield. Oh, I'm sorry, Ken. Oh, I forgot. Our other favorite member from Northfield is what, of course, I met.
Good thing I never forget we're live.
Thank you so much. I'm very pleased to be here in front of the House Judiciary Committee's esteemed members, Representative Ann Donahue from Northfield. And the basics of this bill are really to address a pretty significant inequity, injustice really in terms of self-determination of people with a developmental disability divided into two groups based simply on whether someone does or does not have a private individual who can be their guardian.
And just before you go on, I think we got on our desk H105. This is not H105.
This is H26.
Yeah.
This sounds like my bill.
Okay. So,
But you don't need it because I'm just giving the big overview, you know, but
we'll still take it.
We're thorough around here.
Okay.
Very professional.
so basically there are two courts that grant adult guardianships in Vermont for people who have a developmental disability. The family division grants it for people who don't have a suitable, what's determined a suitable private individual that the court could appoint as their guardian. And under Vermont statute, it's the Commissioner of Dale who becomes their guardian if there's a guardianship petition. The probate court grants guardianships for adults with a developmental disability if they have a private individual that the court can appoint as their guardian. The big difference between those two processes is that if an adult is capable of understanding the basics of guardianship, they can't run all their own affairs, but they do understand what it means, regardless of what the specific disability is. The probate division process allows for granting a voluntary guardianship. But a voluntary guardianship's not available in the family division because the statute doesn't create that option. The option of a voluntary guardianship in the family division was created by statute in 2010. But at that time, it was only created for a family division guardianship where it's only for somebody who has a private individual who can take the role. And there is not a parallel for a person who would understand a guardianship, who would be seeking a voluntary guardianship where it's going to be the Dale Commissioner. So that's the inequity that this is attempting to address. It matters a lot to have a voluntary guardianship. If it's an involuntary guardianship, the person then becomes considered under federal law to be a mental defective. A voluntary guardianship is revocable by an individual. An involuntary one isn't. So it's an important distinction. This bill proposes that all adult guardianships be unified in the probate division. And then they could just follow the same process. If the person didn't have a suitable individual, it would still then go to the Commissioner of Dale. But if the committee didn't want to go that direction, but to focus really on the fundamental inequity, the other option would be to simply amend the family court guardianship to also make the voluntary guardianship process available to people who qualify without regard to whether it's going to be a private individual or a public person. So that's the fundamental objective. Obviously a lot of language to set it up, but that's a key thing. When in 2010, when the concept of the voluntary guardianship was created, it was only applied to probate court guardianships, which are the route when you have somebody who's stepping forward and is qualified to be your guardian. If you're going the family division because you don't have someone, and the Commissioner Dale is going to be the guardian, there is no option because there's no court process set up to seek a voluntary guardianship.
Questions? Angela?
Do you know why it was not set up in both divisions in 2010?
I do not know. Perhaps somebody who was on the Judiciary Committee in 2010 recalls.
I don't think we have anybody here.
So, yeah, so I do not know, it may have been that the proposal only came up from one group, and so there wasn't a look at that parallel.
Zach?
I just have a question in terms of the adolescent that's petitioning, or so I guess to take a step back, who is petitioning for guardianship? Is it the potential guardian themselves, or is it the adolescent that?
Adult,
It is the adult.
it's not an adolescent.
But can an adolescent petition for voluntary guardianship of some, like say I want you to be my, if I'm an adolescent and I want you to be my guardian, could I petition the court for that?
I don't know the law in terms of child guardianships.
I was just curious. I mean, I assumed it was the adult that was petitioning.
But it's the
Yeah.
adult petitioning. The adult is the one who needs a guardian.
Well, yeah, who petitions for the adult guardianship?
Right.
This is the way, I just wonder.
I'm not actually positive. I'd have to double check that.
Yeah. So,
No, it's the adult. An adult with a developmental may submit a petition
okay,
so the adult petitions for themselves in the family division, and yet it's an involuntary petition.
But I guess
Because
that's kind of my question, Anne, is like I think one of the conditions that you had mentioned is the mental capacity or capability to be aware. In some of these cases, I just wonder if that is a factor, right? Like if some of these people do have developmental disabilities and are unable to be mentally aware of what they're petitioning for.
Right. I would
That's
assume there's more than one avenue. I would assume somebody can petition, and then that would always be almost by definition an involuntary petition.
Sure.
Because if the person could not even consent or understand the process.
Sure.
And that would be somebody else bringing the petition.
Yeah.
But an adult can bring the petition, and yet if it's in the family division, even if they've submitted the petition, it's an involuntary guardianship.
where did the need for this come from? I assume you were looking through all our statutes. Maybe you were and deciding that this was, or was there somebody else?
No, there was a person who's been involved, who's been a guardian, who's served as a guardian since 2003, who is the one who approached me about it, pointed out the problem and the discrepancy. And I said, yeah, I mean, he's somebody who's aware of,
Okay.
my work in this area, generally speaking, and brought the issue to me. He's eager and ready to testify.
Yeah, I'm
And
familiar.
can do a much better job than I in really explaining the details of it.
Maybe a constituent of Tom's, I don't know, but,
I think he's a constituent of Mary Howard's
okay, very hard.
Because-
That's right.
because she's a co-sponsor because she was asked to because, asking her representative.
Was
there a name or?
No, it's, well, I have it somewhere, but,
David Searles is
yeah,
the,
it's Dave Searles. So has this been run by the court or other interested parties, or I'm just curious if they have had any initial input from others?
I have not sought that out. I don't know who he may have spoken to, and I think, he's been involved in being concerned about this issue for a while. He talked to me a couple of years ago.
So if we move on this, we certainly have David, we'd have the court. Are there other people, other witnesses you think?
I would imagine Dale would
Yeah.
probably want to testify.
Yeah.
I think those are the key.
Anybody else that you can think of?
I don't know if there's, the Office of the
Somebody
Public.
writes for somebody like that?
That's right. The Office of Public Guardian, I think, is only deals with guardianships for elderly folks, not for developmental.
Okay. All right. So we'll try to find some time to put this in, whether it's going to be crossover or during our time after crossover, because I don't expect we're going to get as much from Senate Judiciary because they've been spending a lot of time on this kind of big bill that they're trying to figure out, which will only take us a year or two.
There you go.
Because we spent weeks on it last year.
I think it's a pretty compelling issue, you know, and
So,
I'm sure there will people who may or may not be supportive of it, may be concerned about, oh, is it gonna overburden Dale or something like that? But I don't think it'd be real difficult to sort out and just make the decision. Seems a persuasive equity issue.
all right.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much. So before we break, so tomorrow morning, 10:15, if we are off the forward time for that, which I think we should be actually. I would have a couple witnesses on the bill the 66-page bill that I freaked you out with last Friday afternoon. We have Deputy Secretary of State and the sponsor coming in, and then we can decide if we need more, or if we're going to be ready to vote that one out. That's the affirmation one. That's just changing, and we're entitled 1 through 10. Just to give you a heads up, as I'm working on the next week's, and I'm going to show this to you, have Tom give me his input. But next week, we're looking at H105, expanding the Youth Substance Awareness Safety Program. We're going to have more people on the 2026 budget. We're going to have hopefully the penultimate or ultimate version of H2 on Wednesday. And then also an act relating to service of writs of possession, H21, and then more budget talk. That's, I think, what we have
What's
so
writ
far.
of possession?
Ask Karen.
Ask Karen's, if you can.
That's a 40, that's H40
Well, actually.
or H45? Is that this?
No, it's not that bill. It's a different bill. It has to do with eviction notices.
All right, we can adjourn until tomorrow at